The International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, is in South Africa this week, stepping up its diplomatic efforts to address Africa's escalating humanitarian crises. Patrick Youssef, who's the ICRC's regional director for Africa, is in Cape Town meeting government officials and diplomats to try and draw attention to the urgent needs of civilians caught in conflict and to advocate for stronger political commitment to international humanitarian law. Let's speak to him now about these meetings and what they hope to accomplish. Patrick, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the program. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You say that Africa is now at the center of the global humanitarian crises. What does that actually look like right now for ordinary civilians caught in conflict?
Well, it looks very dramatic, quite critical in terms of the needs that are brought to the local population, unfortunately, because of the violence and the wars. You know, with more than 50 active armed conflicts in Africa, representing almost 40% of all conflicts worldwide, the humanitarian situation naturally degrades from year to year. And last year was quite critical in terms of the number of displaced within the continent, but also the number of refugees left also because of the armed conflicts, pushing people to move away from not only their homes, but their countries.
So which conflict zones are currently your most urgent concern on the continent right now?
Well, I would say every theater of war is a major concern because of its size, its implications on the civilian population, and its effects on the social services that they should have. Obviously, Sudan is the worst humanitarian crisis across the globe, with the number of displaced over 13 million. People have been displaced within the country. But I would also add the Democratic Republic of Congo's war in the east, namely in Goma, in the north, the Lake Chad region, the Central African Republic. Again, a number of armed conflicts that are equally important, although, as I said, with the scale of the needs in the Sudan and DRC, but also now more recently in Somalia because of the food insecurity, we keep our attention quite high and indeed put the required resources to be able to respond to the humanitarian needs.
So you're in South Africa, in Cape Town, meeting government and diplomatic leaders. What specific outcomes are you pushing for and would like to see come out of these talks?
Well, first and foremost, it's the main message is really first and foremost to bring more attention to the armed conflicts that plague the continent. Again, a continent that has a huge potential, and we see that out of South Africa, Kenya, in Senegal, in so many countries. However, we have a list of other countries that are, again, plagued and cursed by lengthy armed conflicts, by prolonged suffering over 30 years in many countries, with, again, effects on the local population, but also on trade, on commerce, on the global economic outlook for a continent that indeed should be thriving and moving forward. The second message, obviously, is one that asks indeed the South African government to support the humanitarian efforts of the International Committee of the Red Cross, but also the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement as a whole. And I would also add that with the political processes and peace processes that exist across Africa, we always seek that international humanitarian law be really at the center of every political process, or if there are none, that to again advocate for South Africa's voice to be heard on international humanitarian law, on the respect of international humanitarian law, namely because South Africa is also one of the founding members of a global IHL initiative that was launched last year to galvanize more political support to, again, comply and respect international humanitarian law across the world, and obviously specifically in Africa.
Do you think South Africa's diplomatic influence across the continent and maybe even globally can help in terms of maybe getting some practical commitments from authorities and governments across the continent?
Well, I'm sure it's a very strong anchor state. It's a very important voice at the African Union, at the SADC level as well, but also globally. And like we indeed advocate in many capitals of the world, South Africa is one where we have a very long partnership, an operational partnership built on trust and on confidence. And we are quite certain that joining these voices that call for more respect of the law during armed conflicts will, I hope, bring much more dividends and investments in what we think should be indeed the future of humanitarianism also across Africa, a way to respond to humanitarian crises, but also not just to manage crises, but really to be able to find root causes and long-lasting solutions for such issues and problems. And again, it's not only in South Africa that we do this work, across Africa in many capitals, but also across the world.
When you say things like greater political commitment, what does that actually require governments to do differently in practical terms right now?
Well, it's basically to not just reaffirm politically and voice that in public forums, but it's actually to pick up the phone and call a counterpart in another country and plead indeed in the name of humanity for a better respect of international law. It is to take proactive actions at regional, but also at continental forums. Upcoming is the AU Assembly, and there we're really expecting a louder voice on making sure that a war continues, that the belligerents respect international law, but they also respect the basic principles of humanity, meaning those who are not fighting be afforded the right protection, and those infrastructures that are supposed to serve the local population, from providing water to health services, that they are not to be targeted. And therefore, it is practically very possible, after being very vocal, to truly take measures and steps to make sure that during armed conflicts, these laws are respected. And indeed, as we always say, if the intention is to go to peace, then again, the best way to pave the way to peace is by respecting the law, is by treating humanely every person deprived of liberty, but also every woman, every man, every elderly who needs medical attention. And again, bringing more humanity to an environment that unfortunately has been plagued again by violence, by wars, by armed conflicts, and by divisions. And that's basically the message of humanity that the Geneva Conventions have always carried. And we truly hope that every country in the world joins this initiative and brings its voice and its contribution to that global initiative.
Patrick, I wish we could talk for longer, but sadly time's not on our side. So thank you very, very much indeed for joining us and highlighting this critical issue. And I love the word humanity, if we could just find that for all of our people across the continent. And we wish you the best with your deliberations in Cape Town.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks again for having me.
That was Patrick Youssef, the ICRC's Regional Director for Africa, joining us live from Cape Town. And I think sometimes we might be guilty of numbing our feelings a little bit in terms of some of the things that are going on the continent. And maybe we really need to wake up because people are suffering and we need to find a way to do something about it.